I'm Pat Foy, Chairman and CEO of the MTA. I'm joined by Ronnie Hakem, Managing Director of the MTA. And to my left, Joe Loda, former Chairman and CEO of the MTA. This weekend, we celebrated the 115th birthday of the subway system. And I think I can say unequivocally on behalf of the three of us that the system has never faced a disaster as devastating as Superstorm Sandy literally 7 years ago today. 9 subway tunnels under the East River flooded. Metro-North Railroad lost power from 59th Street to Croton-Harmon on the Hudson Line and to New Haven on the New Haven line. The Long Island Railroad evacuated its west side yards and had flooding in one East River tunnel. The UL Cary Tunnel flooded from end to end, and the Queens Midtown Tunnel took on water and was closed. 6 bus depots were disabled by high water. Sandy brought down trees, ripped out power, and inundated tunnels, rail yards, and bus depots in every borough and county of the region. That was 7 years ago today, and a lot has happened since then. We learned valuable lessons from Sandy, and one of the most sobering lessons was that severe weather is no longer an anomaly, and the effects of climate change have only worsened. We thought we were prepared 7 years ago, but Sandy showed us how much we had to do. The governor often says that he's presided over more extreme weather events in his 8 years in office than his father did in 12. But the good news is that we've bounced back from devastation 7 years ago, and we are more prepared than at any time in our history. We identified the system's vulnerabilities, and the MTA found ways to protect against them so that the next time the subways flood, we can close up subway entrances, sidewalk vents, and entire tunnels. We have not just rebuilt, we've made our facilities stronger for the future. We've done a tremendous amount of work these last 7 years. Of the 9 subway tunnels that flooded with corrosive salt water from Sandy, we have fully rehabilitated 7. We're underway and actually months ahead, as everybody here knows, months early on the L project to repair the Canarsie Tube. After the Canarsie Tube is done, we'll move on to the last remaining tunnel, the Rutgers Tube, which carries F trains under the East River. Sandy flooded 4 subway train yards. We're done repairing the Rockaway Yard, and we're in progress at the 207th Street Yard, the 148th Street Yard, and here at the Coney Island Yard, the world's largest subway yard where we're standing today. On our subways, we've also installed mitigation equipment. Approximately 3,500 points of water entry for the subway system received either permanent or temporary custom-made protections. That includes 24 marine doors like those used on submarines and weighing about 3,000 pounds, 2,300 waterproof gates that have been deployed underneath sidewalk grates for station vents, 1,700 portable vent covers, and 68 flexible stairwell covers that can withstand up to 14 feet of water have all been deployed. On the Long Island Railroad, we have already replaced 3 substations on the Long Island branch and upgraded a 4th. We are replacing power, communications, and signal infrastructure and equipment and elevating them so that they're above tomorrow's flood levels. We are currently replacing all third rail and communication components from Long Beach Yard to East Rockaway and a signal system from Valley Stream to Long Beach that was damaged. That includes new equipment with reverse signaling on both tracks, new software and hardware at the signal towers, new overhead communications and signal lines, and new grade crossings and switch machines. And to make sure that the Long Island Railroad is ready for the next big storm, we've ordered 29 new pieces of emergency management equipment, such as new generators, trucks, portable radio kits, and mobile substations. 23 have already been delivered, and the remaining 6 are in the procurement or construction stages. On Metro-North, we're focusing on repairing the Hudson Line, which was hard hit by Sandy, and restoring and buffering the areas of the track that are right by the Hudson River. We've already restored the fleet that was damaged during Sandy, which was 11 coaches that required restoring the trucks and the braking and power systems under the coaches. We're also adding redundancy for power to the Harlem River lift bridge opening mechanisms. Those facilities were also damaged during Sandy, and we have already replaced them with a new facility that's been built higher and installed with watertight doors and sump pumps so that the equipment that operates the bridge opening can stay functional during flooding. We'll be installing new power cables between Manhattan and the Bronx to provide backup power, and we expect completion of that project by early next year. Our vehicular tunnels were also damaged by the Sandy storm surge, particularly the Queens Midtown Tunnel and the UL Carey Tunnel. 12 million gallons of salt water flooded 40% of the Queens Midtown Tunnel. It was closed for a week. The UL Carey Tunnel was flooded by 60 million gallons of salt water, which covered about 2/3 the length of the tunnel. Since then, we've installed 8 new steel flood doors that close the tunnels if necessary. Each gate is 29 feet long and 14 feet high and nearly 2 feet thick. Each one weighs over 20 tons. Four doors were installed at each tunnel, 2 at each entrance. Now I'll turn it over to MTA Managing Director Ronnie Hakem, who's going to discuss our progress on the project right behind us at Coney Island Yard. Ronnie.
Thank you, Pat. Good morning, everyone. So this week is actually a bittersweet week for me because I'm starting to wind down my time here at the MTA. When Superstorm Sandy hit 7 years ago, I was actually working across the river at the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. But I can honestly say that the storm and the devastation that we witnessed here in New York and over in New Jersey was nothing like anything I had ever seen or experienced in my entire transportation career. The chairman has told you about how badly Sandy damaged the entire MTA system. Let me talk a little bit about the place where we are now, the Coney Island Yard, which suffered some of the most severe damage among our train facilities. Coney Island Yard is perhaps one of our most critical subway yards. It is the world's largest subway yard within 74 acres of territory. It's so big, it actually has 3 smaller yards that together service the fleet for 6 subway lines. It has maintenance shops, a subway car wash, power substations, signal towers, and it can fit up to 881 subway cars. The location here is critical. It works because this yard is where 6 subway lines meet. But it's also extremely close to the Coney Island Creek, and it is near the southernmost part of New York City, which, as we all know, is low-lying, and when it floods, this place really floods. When Sandy hit, this yard was hit with 27 million gallons of salt water and debris that poured in. We couldn't keep the water out, and salt water on electrical equipment are a bad combination. The water destroyed critical equipment that we need to run and maintain trains. As the chairman said, it was in fact a huge learning moment. We learned where our vulnerabilities were. We learned what we need to do to prevent this from happening again. And that meant elevating equipment to a height beyond what even the federal government says is flood level. It meant adding more drains, more drainage equipment, stronger pumps, building higher flood walls along the perimeter to keep water back. One of the biggest projects at Coney Island is in fact our new cable bridge, right above where we are today. Historically, we put critical cables underground in concrete to protect them. But now we're putting them on this new 4,280-foot long bridge that will carry the cables across the train tracks that will provide third rail power to the entire yard. That will make it easier for us to maintain and inspect the cables, and it will also provide a way for our employees to cross all those live train tracks quickly and safely. So far, here at Coney Island, we've installed more than 4,300 linear feet of a sheet pile flood wall, goes actually down underground 30 feet, and installed 3,300 linear feet of new drain lines and 600 linear feet of new track and third rail. Our goal here is to complete the perimeter with 12,000 linear feet of that flood wall, 9 new floodgates, and 21,000 feet of new drainage, as well as new pumping stations, debris protection, and the completion of this cable bridge. We've already installed the first section of the cable bridge steel truss spans, and we're about to install another portion. So we're getting there. The entire Coney Island project, which began last year, will take about 54 months to complete. A lot is happening here, and I'm so proud to have been a part of this team that is thinking and planning very smart things for the future, not just for the MTA, but for the entire region and our entire industry. The MTA is the largest public transportation system in North America, and what we do here is watched closely by transit systems around the country and the world. So the impact here is beyond the city, beyond New York State and the country. Now, my good friend to my left and former MTA colleague, Chairman Joe Loda, knows a lot about planning for the future. He was, in fact, the chairman at the time Sandy hit, and his leadership got the MTA back on its feet quickly after Sandy because he knew how important it was to restore and to have a safe transit system running to get the rest of the city back in business after an event as debilitating as Sandy was. So let me turn it over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, Pat. And thank you, Ronnie, for bringing back such good memories of what happened 7 years ago today. But let me tell you what I do remember about that day, and as you look around, I want everybody to look at all the folks who are wearing those orange vests today. It were the workers of the MTA, the Transit Authority, who brought the subway system back. I don't ever remember ever seeing people work so hard on behalf of the people of the city of New York, and as well as workers on the Long Island Railroad, Metro North, and bridges and tunnels over the next few days and few weeks immediately after Sandy, and bringing the entire system back. If you recall, 7 years ago, most people thought the subway system wouldn't be back. Well, it came back in 2.5 days because of the hard work of the men and women of the MTA, and I want to thank them all. I can't thank them enough for what they did on that day. I was amazed as well at how the devastation and what happened to New York City, and I was really surprised at how quickly everything did come back. I'm also amazed at the progress that the MTA has made throughout the entire system. What we're talking about here today is what the MTA is doing to make the system even more resilient and to make it and be prepared for the next storm. There are going to be more storms. There are going to be terrible storms. And what the MTA is doing is making sure that we are prepared, that the MTA is prepared so that we can make sure that the economy of New York and the economy of New York State will continue in spite of the fact that we're going to have these continued storms. So, Pat, and Ronnie, thank you very, very much for this opportunity, and it's great to be back. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Before I take questions, I just want to thank all the transit workers here at Coney Island Yard, as well as the contractors who've done the work, some of which we're going to see today. The bridge, the flood wall, et cetera. It's been an extraordinary effort. As I mentioned, of the 9 tunnels that were flooded during Sandy, 7 have been repaired. The Canarsie Tunnel is on time. Actually, it's going to be months early and on budget. And then we will turn to the Rutgers Tunnel. With that, Dan. Yeah, the answer is much better prepared. Obviously, we've spent a great deal of money. Resiliency is incorporated into every project that we do. We're going to see specifically what work is underway here at Coney Island Yard. And I think it's fair to say that every agency, bridges and tunnels, Long Island Railroad, Metro North, subways, buses, paratransit, is in a far greater state of readiness. That work goes on. As I mentioned, the resiliency investment is incorporated in the design and the engineering of every project that we do since Superstorm Sandy, and clearly going forward. Dana.
On what anniversary of Sandy do you expect the MTA to be fully prepared for another Sandy?
Dana, I think it's fair to say, as you look across climate change events in the country and the world, they're becoming more frequent and more extreme. Whether it's fires in California, whether it's water shortages across the globe, this is a continuous effort. Every project incorporates resiliency, incorporates mitigation. So I think that as weather becomes more extreme, this is going to be a continuing effort. We're proud of the progress that's been made on the yards here, talking about New York City Transit and subways, on the tunnels, but this is an effort that's going to continue far into the future. Finn.
Chairman, could you elaborate on the condition of the Rutgers Tube, why it was put as low priority as it has been put, and what the work is going to entail there, or disruptions, things like that?
Look, I'm not going to speak about disruptions. We'll announce that at the previous time. Nine tunnels under the East River were flooded. 7 have been done. The Canarsie Tunnel is on track, and General Lieber and his team are bringing it in. Obviously, these had to be phased. We didn't want to take 2 East River tunnels out of service because of the impact it would have on customers. Lessons of the L train and frankly other projects will be incorporated into the Rutgers tunnel restoration when that work begins. Andrew.
Just as a follow-up to that, would you anticipate a similar type of model where it would be sort of a nights and weekends reduced type of service situation? The F is obviously a different animal from the L train. And then I have a quick question for Joe, if you don't mind.
Andrew, we're going to do everything we can to minimize customer convenience. That is a high priority in every project we do. I think the balance that was struck on the L train was the right one for 250,000 customers, and both from an engineering and a construction and a customer inconvenience point of view, we're going to be looking to maximize each of those and minimize customer inconvenience.
And Joe, just a quick question for you. 7 years later, what is the image that you recall most vividly and most clearly about the night of Sandy itself? Was it walking around near the Hugh Carey Tunnel? Was it a specific image that flashes into your mind? What do you conjure?
Yeah, I have a photograph in my office that I've taken with me since that day of the water running into the Hugh Carey Tunnel that night. The whitewater rapids that were running into the tunnel. So that's my most vivid memory of that night. And from there, I walked to the World Trade Center with the governor, at which point I realized I was so happy in seeing what was going on at the World Trade Center. I was so happy I wasn't Pat Foy, who was then the executive director of the Port Authority running the World Trade Center, at which point I said, you know what, I'm going back to the MTA Command Center. I've got enough issues to deal with.
Yeah, I ran into the governor and Joe that night. The World Trade Center site was a construction site 7 years ago, and it sounded like Niagara Falls when one got within a block of it. The amount of flooding was extraordinary. Next, please.
Pat, we've been fortunate, obviously, thank you. We've been fortunate in the last 7 years. We have not had anything even close to a superstorm. But what I'm wondering is how the work, and maybe this is a question for Joe, how the work was prioritized. How were the priorities assigned?
Do you want to speak to it?
You want to also talk to it? Was prioritized based on severity. Yeah, actually, you know, as Chairman Foy said, you can't close everything down at once. So you have to put everything in a prioritization order based on severity. Which needs to be worked on first? You do that, you then go on to the next and on to the next and on to the next. You need to, you know, literally do it in priority order because the system needs to run 24/7, 365, and you can't shut it down all at once. So you need to just do it piece by piece, which is why some tunnels were done before other tunnels, based on the severity of the damage that was done.
Do you have just a kind of a round way to say, this is how much work we have, whether by projects, by spending, this is how much we've done, this is how much we have to go, kind of percentage-wise, or money needs to be spent?
Dan, on money that's been committed across the MTA, 77% of it has been spent. We've got a great deal of work to do. The phasing that Joe and I just talked about obviously means that you can't take multiple tunnels under the East River out of service at the same time. So the work will continue, but I think a substantial amount of progress has been made, and the system is in a far better condition in terms of being able to resist and adapt to a storm like the one we experienced 7 years ago.
Hey, just aside from the Rutgers Tunnel, any big projects? I know you mentioned the 207 Street Yard. Any notable projects of what needs to be done?
Look, there's work across the entire system. I think the East River Tunnel's Long Island Railroad asset or Long Island Railroad consideration and not in New York City Transit, but I think there's work in every agency that remains to be done, and we're committed to wrapping it up.
Two questions. 77% of the money that has been committed for this has been spent. Is there more money yet to be committed for these purposes?
There's more money yet to be committed, subject to MTA board approval. For instance, we'll be going to the board with the F train, the Rutgers tunnel for the F train, and we'll be reporting on progress on that going forward.
So there is no way to say like X percentage of the mitigation work has been completed. Okay, all right. And second question for Joe. I'm sorry to bring up old history, but can you speak at all to why it is you represented or misrepresented the reasons for your resignation from the MTA?
It's been a year, and I disagree with every article that's been written that I've misrepresented why I left. As I was said when I left, and I said it, and I'll say it again, I told the governor I would stay for a year. I stayed for a year and a half.